The auditorium buzzed with nervous energy as hundreds of hopeful singers waited for their chance to audition for America's Voice, the country's most popular singing competition. Among the sea of young, polished performers clutching their guitars and sheet music, one figure stood out like a misplaced puzzle piece. Before you watch full story, comment down your country name. I would love to hear. Margaret Chan, 78 years old, sat quietly in the back row wearing a simple floral dress from JCPenney and comfortable walking shoes. Her silver hair was neatly pinned back with bobby pins that had seen better decades, and she clutched a worn leather purse in her lap. Unlike the other contestants who were practicing vocal exercises and applying makeup, Margaret simply sat and observed, a gentle smile playing on her weathered face. She wasn't supposed to be there. It had all started 3 weeks earlier at the Sunset Manor assisted living facility where Margaret had lived for the past 2 years. The weekly talent show was a highlight for the residents, and Margaret had been quietly singing in the corner during the social hour when Tyler Brooks, a 25-year-old activities coordinator, overheard her. Tyler was ambitious, always looking for ways to make his job more exciting and gain social media followers. He had been live streaming parts of the talent shows on TikTok, and the residents' performances usually got a few hundred views and some polite comments. But when he heard Margaret's voice, a cruel idea sparked in his mind. "Mrs. Chen," Tyler had said with false enthusiasm, "you have such a beautiful voice. Have you ever thought about auditioning for a real singing competition?" Margaret laughed softly. "Oh dear, I'm much too old for such things. I just sing for my own enjoyment." "Nonsense!" Tyler insisted, his phone already recording. "Age is just a number. I think you should audition for America's Voice. They have open auditions next month." The other residents gathered around, and Tyler continued his performance. "Come on, everyone. Don't you think Mrs. Chen should audition for America's Voice?" The residents, not understanding Tyler's mocking tone, enthusiastically agreed. They loved Margaret and genuinely thought she had a lovely voice. Tyler's video, titled "Grandma Thinks She Can Win America's Voice," went viral for all the wrong reasons. Comments poured in mocking Margaret's age and appearance. "Delusional old lady," wrote one user. "Someone needs to tell Grandma her time is up," wrote another. But Margaret didn't see the video or the comments. She only saw the encouragement from her friends at Sunset Manor, who pooled their money to pay for her audition registration and transportation. Margaret's granddaughter, Lisa, tried to talk her out of it when she found out about the audition. "Grandma, this is a young person's competition," Lisa said gently during her weekly visit. "These shows can be harsh. I don't want you to get hurt." But Margaret's eyes sparkled with a determination Lisa hadn't seen in years. "Lisa, dear, I've lived through wars, raised 6 children, buried a husband, and survived cancer twice. I think I can handle a singing competition." Margaret had always loved music. As a young woman in Taiwan, she had dreamed of being a singer, but cultural expectations and family obligations had led her down a different path. She became a teacher, then a mother, then a caregiver for aging parents. Music became something she did while cooking dinner or folding laundry, a private joy that sustained her through life's challenges. Now, at 78, with her children grown and her husband gone, Margaret felt a spark of her old dream flickering back to life. The production assistants at America's Voice were not prepared for Margaret Chen. When she walked into the audition venue, clipboard in hand and dressed like she was going to church, several staff members exchanged confused glances. "Ma'am, are you here to pick up someone?" asked a young production assistant. "Oh no, dear," Margaret replied politely. "I'm here to audition. Margaret Chen, contestant number 4847. The assistant checked her list twice, then radioed someone. Within minutes, word had spread throughout the production team. Tyler's viral video had reached the show's producers, and they saw Margaret as perfect comic relief for the episode. "This is television gold," whispered executive producer Rachel Stone to her assistant. "We'll get huge ratings from this. Make sure we get good footage of the judges' reactions." Margaret was assigned to the afternoon session, which meant she would audition in front of the show's 3 celebrity judges, pop star Madison Keys, country legend Buck Morrison, and Grammy-winning producer Jerome Williams. As Margaret waited in the holding area, she struck up conversations with other contestants. Most were kind to her face but whispered among themselves when they thought she couldn't hear. "Poor thing probably has dementia," one young woman said to her friend. "Someone should tell her this isn't a karaoke night at the retirement home," snickered a male contestant with perfectly styled hair. But a few contestants were genuinely kind. Sarah, a 19-year-old from Ohio, sat with Margaret and shared her granola bar. "I think it's awesome that you're here," Sarah said. "My grandmother always said she wanted to try out for a singing competition but never had the courage." Margaret patted Sarah's hand. "Dreams don't have expiration dates, sweetheart. Remember that." The performance. When Margaret's number was finally called, she walked onto the stage with surprising confidence. The massive auditorium fell silent as the judges looked up from their notes, clearly taken aback. Madison Keys, known for her sharp tongue and brutal honesty, raised an eyebrow. "Well, this is unexpected. What's your name, sweetie?" "Margaret Chen," she replied into the microphone, her voice clear and strong. "I'm 78 years old, and I'm here to sing for you today." Buck Morrison, the country legend, leaned back in his chair with a bemused smile. 78 years old. Well, I'll be. What brings you here today, Margaret? "Music has been my companion my whole life," Margaret said simply. "I thought it was time to share it with a bigger audience." Jerome Williams, the producer, was already thinking about the editing possibilities. This would be perfect for the blooper reel they always included in the audition episodes. "All right, Margaret," Madison said with barely concealed amusement. "What are you going to sing for us today?" "I'd like to perform Bridge Over Troubled Water by Simon and Garfunkel," Margaret announced. The judges exchanged glances. It was a challenging song that required both technical skill and emotional depth. Several professional singers had attempted it earlier in the day and failed to impress. "Whenever you're ready," Buck said, settling back to enjoy what he assumed would be an entertaining train wreck. Margaret closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and began to sing. "When you're weary, feeling small." The first few words were soft, almost tentative. But as Margaret continued, something extraordinary began to happen. Her voice, though aged, carried a depth of emotion and life experience that none of the younger contestants could match. "When tears are in your eyes, I will dry them all." Madison Keys stopped looking at her phone. Buck Morrison sat up straighter. Jerome Williams forgot about the editing and started listening, really listening. Margaret's voice wasn't technically perfect. There were slight tremors that came with age, and she couldn't hit the highest notes with the power of a 25-year-old. But what she lacked in technical precision, she more than made up for in pure, authentic emotion. "Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down." As Margaret sang about being a bridge over troubled water, her voice carried the weight of a woman who had been exactly that for countless people throughout her life. She had been the bridge for her children when they struggled, for her husband when he was dying, for her students who needed guidance, for her friends who needed comfort. The auditorium, which had been filled with chatter and movement just minutes before, fell completely silent. Camera operators who had been preparing to capture reactions of shock or amusement found themselves adjusting their shots to capture something else entirely, genuine awe. "When you're down and out, when you're on the street." Margaret opened her eyes and looked directly at the judges. In that moment, they weren't celebrity judges and she wasn't an elderly contestant. They were simply human beings sharing a moment of pure musical connection. Her voice swelled as she reached the climax of the song, and while she couldn't hit the soaring high notes that the original recording demanded, she found a different way to convey the power of the lyrics. She sang with the authority of someone who had lived every word. "Like a bridge over troubled water, I will ease your mind." When Margaret finished, the silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, Buck Morrison began to clap. Madison Keys wiped away a tear she didn't realize had fallen. Jerome Williams shook his head in amazement. And then something unprecedented happened. The entire production crew, camera operators, sound technicians, producers, assistants, everyone began to applaud. It started as polite clapping but quickly grew into something much more powerful. Sarah, the young contestant from Ohio who had shared her granola bar, was the first to stand. Then another contestant joined her. Then another. Within moments, the entire backstage area was on their feet, applauding not just Margaret's performance, but her courage, her authenticity, and her reminder that music transcends age, appearance, and expectations. The judges themselves stood up, something that rarely happened during auditions. Madison Keys, her usual composure completely shattered, spoke first. "Margaret, in 15 years of judging singing competitions, I have never heard anything like that. You didn't just sing that song, you lived it." Buck Morrison nodded vigorously. "Ma'am, that was the most honest, heartfelt performance I've heard in years. You reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place." Jerome Williams, the tough producer who prided himself on emotional detachment, was clearly fighting back tears. "Margaret, you've just taught everyone in this room something important about what real artistry looks like." Margaret smiled graciously, completely unfazed by the overwhelming response. "Thank you, dears. Music isn't about being perfect. It's about being true." What happened next surprised even the judges themselves. Without the usual deliberation, all three judges immediately voted to send Margaret through to the next round. "This is a unanimous yes," Madison announced, her voice still thick with emotion. "Margaret, welcome to America's Voice." The backstage area erupted in cheers. Contestants who had been whispering about Margaret minutes earlier were now approaching her with congratulations and requests for advice. Tyler Brooks, watching the livestream from Sunset Manor, quickly deleted his original mocking video as the comments section filled with praise for Margaret and criticism of his cruel setup. Within hours, Margaret's audition was all over social media, but this time for completely different reasons. Instead of mocking an elderly woman's dreams, people were celebrating her courage and talent. #MargaretChen became a trending hashtag. Videos of her performance were shared millions of times with captions like, "This is what real talent looks like and age is just a number." Lisa, Margaret's granddaughter, called her crying. "Grandma, you're famous." The video has been shared by celebrities, musicians, and people all over the world. "They're calling you an inspiration." Margaret, ever practical, simply said, "Well, that's nice, dear. Do you think you could help me figure out what to wear for the next round?" Margaret's journey on America's Voice continued to defy expectations. While she didn't win the competition, that honor went to a talented 22-year-old from Nashville. She became the show's most beloved contestant and finished in the top 5. Her performances consistently earned standing ovations, not because they were technically perfect, but because they were emotionally authentic. She sang songs by Leonard Cohen, Johnny Cash, and Billie Holiday, choosing pieces that allowed her to tell stories rather than showcase vocal gymnastics. More importantly, Margaret's presence on the show changed its entire dynamic. Younger contestants sought her advice, judges approached critiques with more empathy, and viewers were reminded that talent and authenticity don't have expiration dates. Margaret's story sparked a broader conversation about ageism in entertainment and society. Suddenly, retirement homes across the country were reporting increased interest in their talent shows. Music schools began offering classes specifically for older adults who wanted to pursue delayed dreams. Record labels, initially skeptical, began reaching out to Margaret with offers. She eventually signed with a small independent label that specialized in authentic, story-driven music. Her debut album, Better Late Than Never, was released 6 months after her America's Voice appearance. It featured covers of classic songs performed in Margaret's distinctive style, along with 3 original compositions about her life experiences. The album didn't top the pop charts, but it resonated deeply with listeners of all ages who were inspired by Margaret's message that it's never too late to pursue your dreams. Tyler Brooks was quietly transferred to a different position after the incident, but not before personally apologizing to Margaret. She accepted his apology graciously, as she did everything else. "I understand, dear," she told him. "Sometimes we make mistakes when we're young. The important thing is learning from them." Margaret's room at Sunset Manor became a gathering place for residents and visitors alike. She would often perform impromptu concerts in the common area, and her story inspired several other residents to pursue their own delayed dreams. One gentleman took up painting at 82. A woman who had always wanted to write poetry started a writing group. Another resident learned to play piano for the first time at 75. Margaret Chen's journey from joke to inspiration taught everyone who witnessed it a fundamental truth: talent isn't limited by age, dreams don't have expiration dates, and sometimes the most powerful performances come from those who have lived long enough to understand the true meaning of the songs they sing. When asked about her experience during interviews, Margaret would always say the same thing: "I didn't audition to prove anything to anyone. I auditioned because music makes me happy, and I wanted to share that happiness. If my story inspired others to chase their own dreams, then that's the real victory." Years later, when music industry professionals are asked about the most memorable audition they've ever witnessed, many still point to Margaret Chen's performance of Bridge Over Troubled Water. Not because it was technically perfect, but because it reminded everyone in that room what music is really about: connecting human hearts through shared emotion and authentic expression. Margaret proved that sometimes the most beautiful bridges are built not by those who are strongest, but by those who have weathered the most storms and still choose to sing. If this story touched your heart, remember that it's never too late to pursue your dreams. Whether you're 18 or 80, your voice matters, your story is worth telling, and the world needs what only you can offer. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories that celebrate the power of courage, authenticity, and the timeless magic of music.